Last one. George A. Freeland asks, what was the most impactful piece of filmmaking advice you got from a behind-the-scenes feature, and what movie is it from? Something from Ron Howard's commentary or Wrath of Khan DVD stuck with me about the importance of building a good set and the kind of nonverbal improvisation you can get when there are things for the actors to pick up and poke around. The best piece of advice I ever got was when I was on a set for a low-budget feature film that I directed back in 86, 85. And the producer, we found out in the middle of the shoot, was a coke addict, and he was taking our lunch money and coming back with a tub of deviled ham and a loaf of bread, and that was the lunch for the crew. And a runny nose. And it was one of those things where the wheels just came off. And I couldn't even think about that for 10 or 15, 20 years. Just way too painful. But I did learn something on that. And it wasn't a specific piece of advice so much as perspective. Our director of photography had a wife who was working on a major feature film that was being shot down there as well. It's probably a $7, $8, $10 million film at the time. And that film was in real trouble too. And this DP said to me, Bill, here's something you should be happy about. You're making mistakes with 2 zeros after them, and they're making mistakes with 5 zeros after them. And I thought, wow, that's helps. That helps a lot. As far as filmmaking goes, there's just things that really rang my bell. Sometimes it's just the littlest things. For instance, when I heard that many times in a horror movie, whenever the bad guy strikes, many sound editors will put in a snap of a twig, even if it's inside the house, especially if it's inside the house. They'll put in a snap of a twig because subliminally that sound is the sound that we are programmed to react to. If we're walking along the path having our happy days out there in the grasslands and we hear a twig snap behind us, chances are pretty good that's a lion or some other predator coming after us, and it just gives us this jolt of adrenaline, and there's not much we can do about it. Finding out that they used that and harnessed that, I thought was very cool. One of the things that's really impressed me was a film class I took, and the professor was talking about the power of the cut, of the edit, just the power of the cut, and I didn't know what that meant. And he told me about the first Soviet filmmakers, Eisenstein, especially Sergei Eisenstein, who made some classic films for the Russians. But in the very early days of Soviet cinema, they had no money for anything, the Soviets, the Bolsheviks. So Eisenstein would go and re-edit Western films. And in his most famous experiment, what he did was he would take a picture of he'd go out and shoot some film, obviously. He'd go out and take like a picture of this incredible banquet, just a big old pan of the nicest food in the world, and he'd cut it together with a man's face. And people said, he's obviously very hungry. And then they'd cut together one of, you'd see a family and, it obviously looks like some kind of memory or something, and they'd show a man's face, same man, and I said, oh, now he looks very sad. And then they would show like a party, and said, oh, look, he's actually kind of happy. And the interesting thing was that the film of the man never changed. It was the same exact footage. And that's the power of the cut, is if you take a banquet and then cut to a person's neutral face, you will perceive them to be hungry because your head puts the two things together. One of the simplest pieces of advice I could give you, or have learned pretty much my own, I think, not saying I'm the only person to pick this up by any means, it's just something that if you pay close attention, you'll perceive, and the way you really learn these things is by going out and not doing them. The way you learn how to make a movie correctly is by going out and making a movie badly, and then you realize all of the things that you wanted to do or should have done and didn't do, and you find that out in the edit room, and that kind of knowledge never leaves you. And I think probably the best example of this is what makes a film look like a professional film. What makes a Hollywood film look like a professional film as opposed to a church film? I mean, no disrespect for that, but something like Fireproof or something where they raise $1 million for a church and they decide they're going to make a movie, in Memphis or something. And they spend a lot of money and they get actors and so on. It just doesn't look like a real movie. Why? Why doesn't it look like a real movie, feel like a real movie? Well, this is an interesting piece of information. And Natasha and I have talked about this quite a bit because she is an expert in this particular area. But the reason that most movies that don't look good is because they're showing you the world as a camera sees it, and a Hollywood film shows you the world as your eye sees it. And here's how that works. If you were to look at the screen now, the screen that you're looking at, what you're seeing is that all the three dimensions here. All of that. In fact, that's a great example. This, okay? On this screen, right now, you're seeing my hand and my face, and they're both in perfect focus. Now, if you do that to yourself here, and you have your hand in front of your face and look at the wall or look at the screen, you have to make a decision. And that's what makes a Hollywood film look like a Hollywood film. The camera takes three-dimensional images and compresses them to a flat plane. And since it compresses them into a flat plane, especially in a kind of a narrow little box, your eye is able to perceive everything in the frame pretty much accurately. When in point of fact, if you just look at the screen again, you see I'm in focus, you can see the back of the room's in focus, and not only is the depth not there, but your entire focus is on this image of me talking now. And you don't realize that anything off to the left or right is completely out of focus, absolutely out of focus. Just look at the screen here, continue to look at this, and then just without moving your eyes off the screen, perceive the world around you. And you'll realize that it's all out of focus. And so the human eye is designed to focus on things, and strangely enough, and interestingly enough, the human brain is designed to do this too. For instance, just a little experiment, okay? So just find something off the right of the room that you like, and then go find something on the left of the room that you like. Okay, your brain filtered out the pan. Your brain didn't show you from one to another. It just doesn't process that information. It follows the eyes and the brain are working, and it takes a lot of information processing power to do all this. So if I do this and look down, now of course you're aware of it, but your brain just filters it out. And you know what else is interesting right now? Your brain, right this second, is filtering out the fact that you can see your own nose. Isn't that something? Your nose is in every vision. Every time you've ever looked at the world, your own nose is in the shot, so to speak. And we just don't process it. Camouflage works that way, by the way. The brain and the eye are working so hard, they're chewing up so much processing power and glucose and energy and all the rest of it, that we've evolved into a way of saving processing power and processing speed. So camouflage works like this. If you glance at something, or not even glance, if you look around the weeds in the woods and you don't see the person because he's been broken up into the kind of thing you're trying to process. You're trying to see leaves and people, you're looking for straight lines and solid sheets of color and eyes and face and all that. If you get rid of that with camouflage, your brain and your eye will tell you that there's nothing in this area, and then you can just keep walking because your brain saves that picture. And so if you're not detected immediately, you probably won't be detected. And that's why camouflage is utterly dependent on standing still. Because if I'm looking at some point far away and my brain has already taken in the world, I've already looked at it, I've gone to it in focus, and I see it, so here's a tree line and all the rest of it out there, and row of bushes and everything, and I don't see anything. So my brain paints that picture of that scene and holds it there. It doesn't update it. What it's doing is it's updating what I'm looking at. But if something moves over here, now it immediately just says what? And the whole focus and the whole funnel just turns over there. And you start processing it. Now you see it. Which, by the way, is why, I don't know if Foghorn knew this, but I don't know if anybody else knew this. I learned it not too long ago. Same principle. This is why airplanes at night have lights that blink. Because if that light was steady, your brain would see it once and it'd process it, and that's it. It doesn't look at it anymore. But every time that strobe goes off, every time it fires, it's basically saying to your brain, hey, over here, something's moving over here. You got to look over here. That's why it works. Same thing with the police car lights at nighttime. It's moving. You have to pay attention to it. You don't have a choice. And I'll just close by saying this is the lack of depth of field. Right now, as I say, if you're a certain distance from your monitor, so you can see the tip of my nose is in focus, plus Dave Bowman on the wall behind me, 20, 30 feet behind me, is in focus. That never happens in real life, ever. You'll never see what you're seeing now. If you were standing the same distance away from me as my camera, you could look at me and see me in focus, or you could see Dave Bowman in focus, but you wouldn't see them both together. And that's why movies don't look like Hollywood movies, because they do a flat, universal depth, flat focus all across the screen. Hollywood, on the other hand, has learned that they're going to treat things the way the eye actually works. So if you watch a Hollywood movie, you'll find that, first of all, and I'm doing that here, and I'm doing it intentionally, I'm lit, but the background is dark. It's pulling me out of the background. The worst thing you can do ever, ever, ever is shoot a scene against a wall, because it gives you no depth and nothing changes. It's the worst. And a lot of filmmakers do that. Never, ever shoot something against a wall. So I'm using lighting to pull me out of the background. But in Hollywood, they'll set the depth of field so that only the actor's face is in focus, and sometimes only the actor's eyes are in focus. Real tack-sharp focus. Something about eyes I don't want to forget. And so that's what they do. And they're intentionally letting the background blur, even though the lens is perfectly capable of seeing the whole thing flat. That's not how your brain works. So they recreate it. That's really cool. And there's just one little piece of information about the eyes that I just read, I don't know, a month ago. I thought it was really interesting. Somebody there, because this is a real bright crowd, is going to tell me what the name of the whites of the eyes is called. But here's what's interesting. We share 99% of our DNA with chimps. If you look at chimps don't have whites of their eyes. In fact, no animals really have whites of their eyes. Their entire eye opening is filled with the iris, which makes sense, right? That's what you want. You're going to put eyes here. You might as well have the whole eye doing what it's doing. Why do we have these white areas that don't do anything? Why isn't our eye just all iris and bigger? We could see more things. What's going on here? And the interesting answer is something I never thought about ever. Is it sclera? Thank you. The interesting answer is that we have evolved eyes that are smaller than they need to be, or let me rephrase that, smaller than they could be, because it's in our interest to have a very prominent sclera, very prominent whites of our eyes. Do you know why? It's because without the whites of the eyes, you can't tell what I'm looking at. See, I'm looking at you right now. Not really. I'm looking slightly above you. Now I'm looking at you. I'm looking a few degrees off to the left, a few degrees off to the right. If you watch somebody reading a teleprompter, if you've ever read a teleprompter, it's easy to see somebody just slightly, their eyes are just doing this little thing. And it's the contrast between the sclera and the iris that tells you what that person is looking at. And that's a useful thing to have in a social species. It's good to know who's looking at whom. It's good for mating purposes. It's good for social purposes. It's also good for threat purposes. And you can't tell which way a leopard is looking exactly, not from a distance, but these whites of our eyes are there to signal the difference between this and this and that. And that's what they're there for. I thought that was very cool. Which is why the Ewoks didn't work at all. The little bug eyes, nobody believes it. Anyway, I think that'll do it. Time for me to finish up a little bit of editing and then go home. It's been a fun night as usual, and I'm hoping to be back next week as usual. And I only miss him if I absolutely have to, so sorry we missed last week. And Dave Wellman says, what if I have a lazy eye? I'm assuming he's, I don't know if you're trying to, whether that's serious or not, but that's one of the reasons why lazy eye is so disturbing to the people talking to somebody with lazy eye. Because the pupils and the sclera are not sending us the same signal. We're seeing one eye looking right at us and another eye looking off in a direction, and we don't know which one to pick. We don't know which one he's using. So it causes us this constant state of anxiety because we're not able to just instantly do what we normally do, which is look people in the eyes. And people who can't look people in the eyes usually have a problem with some kind of a neurotic reason for why they can't do it. And so that causes some discomfort on the part of the viewer. I love little pieces of information like that. They just make my entire life interesting. That I just read that and I just thought, never thought of that, not for a second. Never occurred to me even that human eyes have these prominent whites when other animals don't. Never even realized it. I knew animal eyes looked different, but I didn't really think about why. Now I know why, and I know what made it happen that way. That's just cool. And it's detectable. It allows you to detect from a significant different distance what direction another human is looking. And that's why if you want people to get close, before you waste a musket ball on them, because musket balls have an effective range of 50 yards, maybe, before they go spinning off. If you want to make sure that you're going to hit them, you got to make sure that they get close enough before you fire, and that's why you wouldn't want to shoot somebody until you can see the whites of their eyes. All right, so much for that. Okay, well, it's great being here. Thanks again for our members who make all of this possible. Every week, we're here because of the fact that there's a small percentage of people who watch these shows actually paying for them, and for those people, we're very, very grateful. And that'll do it. So everybody have a good week. November of 2017, unbelievable. We'll be back next week to try and make some sense out of all of this, have a little fun. And again, last time, if you are interested in doing this, it's Aurora Republic, one word, .space. And that's where we've put an awful lot of effort. Okay, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.